like I said before, I wasn't really a baseball guy. So I started training athletes about 10 years ago. But I just thought this is falling short of what these guys need. Like, I can get you to a 4.3, but if you show up at Florida State and a 4.3 40 is all you have to offer, eventually you're going to get washed out.
Hey, and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gelner, and thank you so much for being here. This episode is brought to you by baseballcloud, the official voice of data. baseballcloud's revolutionary software platform brings to life the numbers captured by TrackMan and FlightScope. This provides colleges, players, and facility owners around the world a turnkey product, allowing them to analyze their data using key metrics and custom visualizations on one intuitive user interface. Go to baseballcloud.com to find out how you can have your own data analytics department for your program. Data has a story to tell, and Baseball Cloud gives it a voice. In this episode, I welcome Dominic Robinson, who's an experienced coach, mentor, and the founder and director of 3D Sports and Performance. During the show, Dominic dives into his past experience playing baseball and football at Florida State University and being an NFL player for the St. Louis Rams. We take a deep dive into what he has learned from playing from some of the world's best coaches in Mike Martin and Bobby Bowden. But he also discusses how 3D sports performance can bring the best out in youth athletes and how Dominic got his start in coaching baseball players. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Dominic Robinson. Dominic, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm extremely honored with the guys that you've had on this podcast to be one of the guys in that list, that long list of great people that I look up to and respect. And some of those guys are my mentors. I feel honored that you even thought of me. So thanks for having me.
No, definitely. And, we met at Bridge the Gap, and we got to sit down and talk a little baseball, and I absolutely love your background, and I love that you're not a baseball guy, or you didn't at least grow up a baseball guy, but you're a baseball guy now. And so talk to us a little bit about your journey throughout the game and how you really got hooked and how you started to just fall in love with the game of baseball.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I grew up really just kind of liking baseball. I was always, around it enough, but I never really was immersed in baseball until I was probably about 20. So it's really interesting or unique when I'm in a lot of the settings like Bridge the Gap or a Palooza or any of these events, ABCA, and I'm around these guys who just have been in love with baseball since they were 4 years old. Mm-hmm. I got to fall in love with baseball as an adult, which is a really interesting, unique thing that most people don't get to experience. So all the things that I was learning, I may have been a little younger than 28, I was learning as an adult, where a lot of these guys had to unlearn some of the things that were taught poorly to them, or they were able to, or they were learning, they were adding on to their things that they learned from the time that they were very young. And I wasn't really that way. I really loved basketball growing up. I played, and then I was able to play football professionally. And so, although I played baseball and I even played baseball at Florida State, I never was, a truly immersed in baseball guy until even long after I was playing.
Well, I love that. And, while we're on the subject of your background, and you've got to play for some absolutely phenomenal coaches, and you did grow up and you played football. You played football at Florida State. And so talk to us about what you learned there and kind of what you've been able to take from that experience. And even though it may not be baseball, I like to learn from great coaches of literally every profession. So what are some of the things that you took from your experience there?
Yeah, it's pretty stupid, the experience that I was able to have. There's not many people that can say that they coached for the greatest coaches, period. Not the greatest coaches in college, not the greatest coaches in one sport, but Bobby Bowden and Mike are two of the greatest coaches to ever walk the earth. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I got to play for them both, it's unconscionable. It's hard for me to even imagine and when I look back, I'm so incredibly thankful. And the one of the things that I think that both of them have in common, and this is something that I've tried to apply to my life, is these were two people who cared about young men first. Like, that was their priority. That was not a secondary thing. That wasn't a fake thing. That wasn't something that they tried to do because they wanted to win more games. They legitimately cared about each and every player that they came in contact with, or that they come in contact with. And that showed. And so because of it, they get the result that they've had, a multitude of wins. But that was never the priority for them. It was never winning games first. It was always that we were respectful, that we honored the game, that we honored our teammates, that we took care of each other, that we respected the people who helped in the clubhouse, that cleaned the field, all of those things. And so because of it, we won games. I was fortunate to win a lot of games. My son was actually asking me the other day, what's the highest you were ranked? And at one time I was ranked number 1 in baseball and number 4 in football.
Wow.
And, that's a pretty cool thing. So we won a lot of games, but that was never number 1. And you knew that in the way that they carried themselves completely.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And again, you couldn't have pegged two better coaches to be able to learn from and get to play for. And you also shared with me and Connor Dawson a story about Mark Bulger and whenever you were playing with the Rams. And again, not a baseball podcast, but this is something that every single person, or not a baseball story, but this is something that everybody can take away from this, and just the attention to detail that happens at the professional level. So do you mind sharing that before we kind of lead into some baseball stuff?
Big time. I definitely want to share that story. I want to share a story about Coach Bowden.
Do it. I love it.
You want to do that now?
Yes.
So a couple years ago, gosh, I can't even remember. It might have been 2012. I was trying to think of the AFCA, the American Football Coaches Association conference that I went to. I believe it was 2012 in Dallas. And I hadn't seen Coach Bowden. I finished playing in 2004. So you're looking at 8 years. I want you to think about the fact that Coach Bowden had been coaching since 70 or something like that. So you have all the players before me, thousands of players. Then you have all the players, from the 8 years after I left. Coach Bowden is speaking at the convention. There's 20,000 coaches at the convention. He just spoke in front of all these coaches. Not only were there 20,000 coaches there, but I would imagine watching him speak, he probably had hundreds of his former players who are now coaches that are also listening to him speak. And he finishes speaking, and he's got security guards around him, and they're trying to rush him out. There's no way he's going to get out of there unless he has this security that's rushing him out. He's an 80-something-year-old man. He doesn't move, like he used to. He's not a spring chicken. He's getting rushed out of there by these security guards, and everybody wants to talk to Coach Bowden, right? He's so personable that everyone feels like he's their father or their grandfather. That's the way he makes it feel. I just happen to be on the same path. We're going to meet at a cross section. And this was just, I wasn't walking to talk to him. I knew that he needed to get out of there. There was no way he could stop. I could see that everybody wanted to stop him. The security guards aren't letting them stop him. I'm not thinking there's any chance that he would even notice me or recognize me or anything. I'm just walking to get to the elevator. He stops his security guards. He stops me. He begins to talk to me and mention to me my apartment complex that I grew up in and the sweet potato pie that my mother made for him and his staff when they came to visit me in 1998.
Wow.
And he begins to name off my sister's names, Tiffany and Vanessa, my mother, and the meal that we had that night.
Oh my gosh.
And I want you to think about the amount of recruits that he sat down and had dinner with. I want you to think of the amount of trips that he's been on, and the different apartment complexes that he's been in, and houses, and all of those things. The fact that he remembered, the fact that he even spotted my face, I think is pretty extraordinary. The fact that he remembered me, my name, my accomplishments, he began to list off. I remember when you made this play. I remember when you made that play. Everyone remembers I made a big play in the Florida game. Everyone remembers that. But he was naming off random, third down catches that I made against Wake Forest on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that game in Wake Forest. It was 3rd and 7, and we hit you on that dig route for 9 yards, and you made a phenomenal catch with the guy hanging all over you. That was the moment where I said, okay, this is a person who cared about people, and he made an effort that, okay, if this guy's going to play for me, I'm not just going to know him for his accomplishments, but I'm also going to, I'm going to make an effort to remember his family, the things that he enjoys. He was invested in me as an individual and not just me as an athlete. To the extent that you remember my mother's sweet potato pie,
that's crazy.
It's pretty ridiculous, wow. Man. I just thought, and he's 80-something years old. Then I leave that convention and I'm just awestruck. I couldn't believe that, just because I coach kids now too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, man, what was Jimmy's last name that I coached last year?
Yeah.
At the time, I think I was a high school football coach, and I'm going, man, I had a senior last year. What was, I can't even remember that. And here's this great individual who had coached some of the greatest players of all time. Charlie Ward, Deion Sanders, Chris Winkie, Peter Ward. He coached the best of them. And he remembers me, this one-off receiver who was okay, and he remembered me and remembered my name, remembered my mom. You would expect him to remember Deion Sanders' mom, but to remember mine was pretty extraordinary. Then I leave that meeting, put him an email, just, hey, thanks, coach. It was so good to see you. He was in Hawaii with his wife on vacation. He responded to my email within an hour.
Wow.
And that really, really got me, because I thought of all the texts and emails and things that I've put off and that I failed to return at that point. And I go, this guy is pulled in way more different directions than me. He's got way more going on than I have going on. I can promise you that. Like I said, I was just a high school football, defensive coordinator at the time. For him to care that much about me, that said something. That really spoke to me as a person. Like, I got to do better. I have to do better. We all have to do better at communicating with people, caring about people, pouring into people. And we can't just talk about it. Here's a guy he's not just talking about it. When
right.
He tells you, when Coach Bowden told me he loves me, he meant that.
Mm-hmm.
Because for him to send that email, to return that email back to me at a timely manner, within an hour, while he's on vacation with his wife, he had already done enough. If Coach Bowden never did anything for me, he had already done plenty, offering me an opportunity to play at Florida State. He didn't have to do that. So I wanted to share that story, because I think that's a common trait that I think great people have. I have a similar story with Mike Martin, and we're really both Mike Martins, since Mike Martin Jr. was my coach, the outfield coach. But both of them have been so gracious to me since I've left Florida State. It's unreal. My son got to go in the dugout of a College World Series when he was, 7 or something, 8, at the College World Series, to meet James Ramsey, who was a phenomenal player at the time. James Ramsey gave him a bracelet, just stuff that, they didn't have to do that. Every time they've gone to the College World Series, I've had tickets, great tickets in with the families and everything. And they've been extremely gracious, and they've been more than family for me also. So wanted to call that story out.
No, definitely. That's absolutely fantastic. And no, you're definitely, you're calling me out a little bit, because I feel like I need to get better at that. And man, it's I've only been coaching for 6 years, and Coach Bowden's coaching for 60, and the amount of names that he would have to remember at that time, that's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, think about that, man. All of us that are listening to this podcast as coaches, if we say we care, let's show it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's show it, and that is, to me, that's the ultimate form. When you can tell me something about my mother who you met in 1998 and it's 2012 and I haven't played for you for 12 years and you're remembering my little dinky apartment complex there's nothing special about it. It's not like, you know what I mean? It tells me that that's the ultimate form of caring about somebody, you know, and that's showing it, you know, in a way that I honestly, like you said, I couldn't do that at the time. You know, I couldn't do that about my current players, much less a guy that played for me 12 years ago and wasn't a star. You know, I wasn't necessarily a star at Florida State. You know, I was a guy, I was a starter, but that was really cool.
That is very cool.
Want to go Mark Bolger? Mark Bolger story now?
So you got me fired up about this because I even told the kids that we work with or that I get to coach, the opportunity to coach here. And as soon as you told me that, I was like, this is one of those that I heard, you know, one of those primary sources that I love to hear things like this, just because I think we as kids, and I did the same thing, we don't understand how much attention to detail it matters whenever we are trying to make it to the major leagues or trying to make it to the NFL. But just tell us a little bit about Mark Bolger and the story that you told us then.
Yeah, I just think it's such a great testament to excellence. And it also tells you, it kind of tells you how great these guys that we watch on TV, like Mark Bolger's not going to go in the Hall of Fame. But after I tell this story, you're going to go, holy cow, this guy was so much better than everyone else. He's so much better than some of the top level college quarterbacks that we've been watching here during bowl season. And so I line up to run a dig. We're in one-on-one. We're in our one-on-one period. I run a dig. I make the catch. We complete the catch. You know, good route, good ball. You know, I turn up, tuck. As I jogging back to the quarterback, I could see that Bolger is just he's just beside himself. He's really upset. You know, he's not like throwing water bottles or anything like that, but you could see the look on his face as if he made a huge mistake. It's almost like he looked like he threw an interception. And I'm thinking, man, did I run the wrong route? I'm thinking, is he mad at me? You know, I'm a rookie. This guy's a Pro Bowler. And I'm thinking, man, I must have done something wrong. It's always you, you know. Uh-huh. It's always you. We're so selfish, right? We're always thinking about ourselves. So I'm thinking, man, I must have really screwed up. And, I hand him the ball back and he's patting his chest. It's like, my bad, my fault. I'm going, okay, we completed it. You know, like what happened? Because I wanted to hit, you know, the little cleft on the 1. So I was number 18. There's a 1 and an 8. I caught the ball on the 8. So I went back and watched this on film because I was just amazed at this. I went back and look, I caught the ball on the 8. He said, I wanted to hit you on the cleft of, he didn't say the cleft, but he pointed at my chest and he said, right there on the 1. I was trying to hit you on that 1 and I was behind. And I just thought, I mean, the distance that he missed was probably 6 inches at the most. And he was so upset. Like I said, it was like he had put an interception. And this wasn't a coach driven thing. Coach didn't get on him. The coaches never. NFL, they rarely get on anybody. They don't get on him. Nobody had said anything to him. It was a complete pass. You know, we won. If we were keeping score, we won that rep. But in his mind, his internal motivation there was so great that it was like a loss to him. He wanted so badly to hit me in that 1 that even though we completed the pass and we won that rep, wasn't a win in his mind.
Wow.
And I just thought, man, that is excellent. Like that called me out because then I go back and I look at my route and I go, well, my route was extremely sloppy in comparison to that standard. Mm-hmm. If that's the standard that we're living by in the NFL, then I've got a long way to go because I was just happy we completed the pass, you know? And he's thinking, man, I missed by 6 inches. It's a loss. It's an L. And I just thought, man, I got to do better. That's another, you know, just like the Bobby Bowden thing. I got to do better because my expectation or my standard for myself was nowhere near that, where if I missed around 6 inches, that I would be that beside myself.
Wow, that's I love it, and it just gives me goosebumps. You telling me that again, just because again the attention to detail is so fine, and again that's one of those things that if as a coach, if we don't have attention to detail and we're trying to train our players these different things, and they're never going to learn it unless they get to a high level like that. And that's got to be the expectation. And so and sometimes, and it's tough for me as a coach because I don't want to be really attentive to details that don't matter, but I also want to be very attentive to the ones that do. So for myself, I've kind of been trying to figure out, and maneuver those myself lately. And that's just something that I've been trying to work through, but enough about that. So let's talk about 3D performance and what you guys are doing and how, what your journey is for that and kind of your vision, but just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, I started, like I said before, I wasn't really a baseball guy. So I started training athletes about 10 years ago. And I started, and I was really just to train. I was, like I said, I was a high school football coach and really wanted to work with getting football players something different than just speed and agility training. So I lived in Tallahassee, and everybody in Tallahassee, Florida was a speed trainer. Everybody was teaching guys how to run faster 40, which is fine. I think running fast is the important, aspect of any sport, but yes, especially football. Fast guys are guys you want on your team. But I just thought this is falling short of what these guys need. Like, I can get you to a 4.3, but if you show up at Florida State and a 4.3 40 is all you have to offer, eventually you're going to get washed out. Somebody's going to have a 4.3 and they're going to have more explosiveness. They're going to have more strength. They're going to be better in the classroom. They're going to be able to handle interviews. They're going to be able to manage their time better. So I want to provide something more than just run faster, jump higher. And so that's where 3D Sports Performance started. And at the time we were actually calling it D1 Sports Academy. And that's kind of how it all started. And then I moved to Dallas, Texas. And while I was in Dallas, I was training a kid that was going on to play at Texas Tech. And a parent called me, and they had, believe it or not, it was an 8-year-old. And I'm a little ashamed of this now because it was an 8-year-old. And I think the idea of training an 8-year-old is kind of kind of silly. But I needed the money at the time, so they had an 8-year-old, and they saw me training this football athlete who was a player at Texas Tech, and their kid played baseball, and they wanted me to train their young 8-year-old. So I started with him, and from that, I got another kid who I think was 11. As I was training those two, a whole baseball program called the Texas Blackhawks, which I'm not even sure they exist anymore. They asked me to come train their guys, and it kind of just took off from there. And I've been in baseball pretty much ever since. I had a couple small breaks in between where I was coaching college football. I coached college football at Drake University, and I was at University of West Georgia for a little bit, and so I've kind of bounced around a little bit, but 3D Sports Performance has just grown and grown, and it's really turned into a baseball program, not intentionally, but my whole life has really been about answering the call. Wherever there's a need, filling the hole. I went to college as a defensive back, and I wasn't going to play baseball. The baseball program came to me, said they needed a center fielder, so I went and played baseball. The offense, Anquan Bowden blew out his knee. They needed a slot receiver. So I moved from cornerback to slot receiver. Like I said, as a trainer, I started training football players. There was a need. They wanted me to train baseball players. I started training baseball players. It's kind of been my whole life. It's just been filling holes or answering the call to wherever the need. And so the baseball program grew from just a small 9U baseball, team of guys that we were probably like AA, maybe not even AA. We started, and I was in Iowa. It was sort of just a ragtag bunch of kids who we struggled catching fly balls, to what it's become now this summer. We won the USA Team Championships at 14U, and I've now got players 17 different states, all across the country. I'm hoping to cross over 20 states this summer, or just 20 different states that have players play for me from 20 different states. And it's just grown into something that is just, it's hard to believe for me, because like I said, this was never the intention. When I started, I was just trying to affect the group that I had. And there was these 9-year-olds who were about AA level that couldn't even catch fly balls. And I was just trying to teach them how to catch fly balls. We'd spend an hour, 45 minutes on learning how to catch a fly ball. And now I've got I've got kids committed to Stanford, TCU, Oregon State. One of the kids, Tanner Smith, who started with me actually when I was in Iowa. Mm-hmm. He was in Minnesota. We moved to Arizona, then he moved to Arizona, and he moved out here with the dream to actually go play at University of Florida, and just felt like I couldn't get there from Minnesota, just the competition level. He just accepted a scholarship or committed to Oregon State, which is huge. It's big time, mm-hmm. for a kid from Minnesota. So yeah, it's hard to believe, man. It's been really cool.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. Well, say that I called and I'm a potential client, and I said, Dominic, I want to start training with you, let's say in the off season. So August. So what would kind of the first day look like? And then kind of lead us through what a typical off season looks like for you guys.
Yeah. So, I guess to start, the first thing I would say is there is no off season. We call it the training season. The first season, or the August to, kind of December, is what we call training season. Then we go from the training season to the preseason, and preseason to end season. And each season sort of has its own sub season, so in season, there's times where we're in season, and there's times where we can get after it, and we need to, as far as like in the weight room or, agility training or whatever. And then there's times in season where we're just letting it eat. We're not caring about any sort of performance goals, or anything like that. So that would kind of be a sub season, while in season. Same thing with off season, obviously, or not off season, but the training season. Obviously in the beginning, you're assessing the damage done from the season. Some guys have had a bunch of time off, especially here in Arizona, because it gets so hot that you can't play at all in July and August. Those guys would start and they would be able to start their on-ramp, right there in August or September. Some guys will play, they'll take part in a lot of the USA baseball stuff. So they don't need to on-ramp. They need some time they need some time off from throwing. They really need to be as far away from baseball as possible. So, we're not looking at any sort of baseball type movement. We're sort of, kind of what I think Jaeger calls it, active rest, so we're hoping that they're playing another sport, in addition to the strength training. We're hoping they're getting ready for football season or basketball season or whatever. So I would say that beginning August to September is the time where we're really just focusing on, again, two different things. If I've got a guy who's been ramped up and playing, and he made the USA national team, and he was overseas or whatever, and he was playing at a high level, we're going to scale back, how we're getting after it for that first month.
Sure.
If I've got a guy who has had that time off, finished in July, let's say, in August, we're gonna get after it. I guess the beginning for everybody though is always going to be about establishing a foundation of fitness, establishing a foundation of strength, establishing a foundation of movement, and understanding what my expectation is for them. That's kind of the biggest thing. Is do your players understand your expectation? Is it clear and precise? If they don't understand the expectation, then all of the things that you're going to want to do in, doing the drive line, velocity days, increasing your exit velocity and all this other stuff, none of that's going to matter come November, December, if they don't first understand your expectation of all the things that you're going to do in August, September, October. So that would be the first step, is like, we're going to, assess where they're at as far as when they finished competition.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to figure out, okay, when's the best time for us to begin back competition? When do you desire to compete? And then when do you need to be your best? Most of my guys don't need to be their best really until probably March, towards the tail end of March. And then most guys, obviously, with high school here, the state tournaments are in May.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to need to be the best in May, June, and July, because that's when all the USA and the perfect game stuff is going to happen. So those things are really important to establish first. Is, okay, when did you finish? When are you starting back up? You need to be back up. And then when do you need to be your best? And I think that's where a lot of people screw it up, is they forget that they need to be their best like 8 months from now. So they're so excited for August. They're so excited for September. We're going to get so much stronger. We're going to get so much faster. But they're forgetting that it's not it's not for 9 months that you have to be your best.
Right.
You got to scale it back. You cannot be in peak performance level in December at 13, 14, 15 years old, which is most of the kids that I get are probably 13, 14. You cannot. There's no chance you will be your peak in December and then also go play in front of UCLA in July and expect to get the best out of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever school it is. And that's the biggest thing. And that's kind of the hardest thing to impress onto the parent, is understanding that side of it. The parents, they want to play. They want to play now. Everyone else is playing. We got to play this show, go to this showcase, go to that showcase. And I'm so tired of, I'm so done with hearing about these showcases really from September to December. And it's driving me insane. And I just keep saying this, is that why are you showing up to a showcase with nothing to showcase? I'm so sick of a guy that's going to a showcase in October and throwing, let's just say he's throwing 70 poo. Mm-hmm. And then he's going to go 2 weeks from now, he's going to show up to a different showcase. For what? What do you show? Nobody wants to see you touch 73. Like, that's not, there's nothing, there's nothing to showcase there. Spend that money, spend that time, spend those resources on getting stronger, getting more athletic. You're out of shape, you're overweight, you haven't done anything in 2 months, and then you show up to a showcase. It's just that part's driving me crazy about just youth sports in general. And baseball is really bad with that. It's just, I don't mind a showcase in the fall, especially because I used to live in Iowa, and those guys, they actually play, their high school season is in July. Mm-hmm. So the big tournaments where they can showcase themselves, they can't even go to because their high schools are playing.
Right.
So I don't mind there being a showcase in September and October for those guys. I had a kid actually from Iowa that came out here for the senior fall classic and did very well. He needs to do that. He has no choice because no one's ever going to see him play. The schools that are watching here for the senior fall classic, they're not going to Iowa to watch him play. There's not enough good baseball out there for them to travel out there. So he's got to do it. So that's one of the things that is driving me crazy about the baseball. So we spend that time when everyone else is showcasing. We're spending that time getting strong, getting faster, improving our movement, improving our strength, really just getting more athletic. My biggest thing is athletic development. So all these things that I'm talking about are all lead to athletic development, your strength, your agility, mm-hmm. all of those things. And that's kind of, I started doing that when nobody was talking about. So some of these things that everybody's doing now in regards to movement, prep, and things like that. I was doing hitting lessons with not very good hitters and things like that. And I was spending 30 or 40 minutes without swinging a bat before that was cool to do it. Now people are doing it. But I've been doing that for a long time because I am a firm believer that athleticism is king.
No, definitely.
And it's everything. Yeah.
Oh,
Athleticism is everything.
Let me take a few seconds to tell you guys about OnBaseU. OnBase University is an organization that studies how the human body moves in baseball and softball. They offer certification seminars that teach coaches, trainers, and medical professionals how to assess an athlete's physical ability to perform movement patterns that are specific to hitting and pitching. For example, they just put up a blog post on their website, onbaseu.com, that discussed why hip internal rotation is important in hitting and how they evaluate it with their OnBaseU screen. If you want to learn more about OnBaseU, I did a podcast with the OnBaseU founder, Dr. Greg Rose, episode 78, and he talked about how he modeled the screen after golf assessments that he created for TPI. They are hosting pitching and hitting seminars in Phoenix, Newark, and Houston over the next few months. I will be attending one soon, and I hope to see you there. I'm right there with you, and I think that, sometimes we get hung up on kids playing multi-sports. Well, I think the kids that are the best athletes do play multiple sports, and for the rest of us, especially the baseball-only guys, training athleticism is at a paramount for sure. But, scaling it back to, first day or the first couple of times that you're with them, something that I am trying to get better at is just assessing the players. And you hit on that a little bit, especially from the mental aspect of what to expect. But what do you have on physical assessments, and what do you guys use for that? And if there's any advice for coaches who, like myself, who were not in the performance world, but we would probably like to try something similar, do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, this is my best advice, and I brought this up at Bridge the Gap, is get yourself or figure out a very thorough warm-up. And I couldn't tell you how paramount I believe the warm-up is. And my kids are so probably done with me, is stressing the importance of the warm-up. Because the warm-up can be, in addition to obviously waking you up, getting your central nervous system going, lubing up your joints and all of that stuff. The warm-up is a place where you can establish your speed development program. A warm-up is where you can work on your movement, your flexibility, your mobility. Warm-up is where you as a coach can assess where are the players, how sore are they, how are they moving, do they understand what I ask of them in a squat, in a lunge, all of those things. So there's so much information, and there's so many things that can happen within the warm-up. And what we do miss, I think, a lot of times is a warm-up happens pre-strength workout. So it's pre your weight room. Mm-hmm. You have a warm-up pre-game. You have a warm-up pre-practice. You have a warm-up prior to everything else you do. So it's the one place where you can develop the most. It's the one thing that you do the most. If you think about, a year, let's say you have 180 opportunities to play games, train, practice. You have a warm-up pre-practice. I don't think I mentioned practice. So you have a warm-up. Let's just say that's 180 out of 365 days. Let's just say that's 180 opportunities to work on your movement. And you don't ever even have to have a movement prep period per se, or a speed development period. You can build those things into the warm-up. And so those are the opportunities that you have that are going to be there, and it makes you more time efficient. The kids begin to learn what they need. You also put it on them to know and understand the warm-up and know and understand the different facets of the warm-up. Like we may have a linear movement warm-up and a lateral movement warm-up. The more you do it, the more the kids understand it, they can carry it out on their own. And then also they can now understand what their body needs. Mm-hmm. Because we put an emphasis in it, and coach is out there, he's active, he's engaged. So I'm always talking to the kids during the warm-up. I'm always, like I said, I'm always assessing kind of how they're moving, how they're feeling, the stresses that have been put on them. Sometimes it's school, Sometimes their girlfriends or whoever it is, are driving them crazy. Their parents are driving them crazy. Those are things that you need to know, as you're doing it. So, so that's my biggest, advice to most coaches, and kind of one of the places where I think people miss it is we just tell the kids, or, me, I don't do this, but in general, just tell the kids, hey, go warm up.
Mm-hmm.
A long time ago, Jager taught me or told me, you don't throw to warm up, you warm up to throw. And that's a really important thing, that I learned, because early on, and I'm talking way back, I would have the kids throw and then I would go through a warm up. I've always done a dynamic warm up, pre everything, but I used to have them throw first and then warm up. And this is before I was using J bands. Once I started using J bands, that changed. But yeah, so that's my biggest advice to everyone is get yourself probably, at least have like 3 warm ups that, like the back of your hand that, really well. And then pound those warm ups, like I said, and maybe a linear, lateral, and maybe like a heavy mobility where you would say you don't have a lot of space, so you say you're stuck in the weight room and you can't stride out for 10 or 15 yards, have a warm up where you can be in place that you could do, like say in your living room.
Mm-hmm.
That way you can tell the kids, hey man, we don't have training tomorrow, but go through your mobility warm up. And now they can do that on their own, and they have no excuse to do it because they don't need a bunch of space. They can't say, hey, coach, I don't have a football field in my backyard.
Right.
But, dude, you could do that in your room. So have something like that and make sure and just drill it. And then you have these checkpoints. Man, on that side lunge, Johnny looked really good today. So he must be feeling good today. We can push it a little bit harder if you're in the weight rooms, per se. We can really push his lateral, strength today because he's feeling good. Man, he's not looking really good today. We may need to scale back the weight or the load or the intensity maybe needs to be scaled back. All 10 of my kids that I have, or 15 or whatever it is, they're all looking like they're moving a little stiff today. Let's spend a little bit more time in the mobility, flexibility portion today, and maybe scale back some of the strength or the speed stuff if you're working on a speed day, things like that. You can use that warm up. It's a utility belt. You can use it for so many things.
Oh, definitely. And you're preached to the choir a little bit because I've been guilty of that completely. And usually I get stuck dragging the field or setting up for the different drills, but using the warm up and I'm obviously not as good at assessing, their different physical ailments or how they're feeling as I'm not as good as you are, but I do use that to kind of assess where they are mentally and, how was their day, or just getting to know them better and walking around and asking them how their day went, and usually you get good. And so you have to ask another question. Hey, well, what was good about it? What was something good that happened today? Or what'd you do this weekend? Or, just random questions like that. But something that I've always been curious about is, should we change our warm up daily? Because what happens is we get one really good dynamic warm up. We make sure the kids know it. And then we do the same thing all season. And depending on your answer, I don't know if we'll disagree or agree, but I think that there's a way that they, like you've been saying, to get better every single day in their warm up. We can use a lot of different things to add to that we see as far as physically. We can add that to the warm up so they can work on their deficiencies while warming up, and that's just killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But like I said myself, we usually use the same warm up all year long just because that's what the kids know and that's what's easiest. But is that the best way to do it? Or how often should we change it if we do decide to do that?
Yeah, I think what you want to do, you want them to have staples. You want them to have something that they always can get done. It's probably somewhere between the first 3 to 5 minutes where this is what we do, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it all the time, but it's something that you want them to be able to do unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of their time to figure out where they're at, and it is for you too, but it's their time where they're kind of figuring out, okay, man, I am dragging today. I am not feeling good. And then from that point, that's where it's, okay, we either go into the speed development, type stuff, or we go into our lateral movement type stuff, or we go into, okay, now it's a really heavy mobility day because we are sore as heck and we got to get moving. You know what I mean? And I think that's what I've found has worked best, where I want to shock them. I want to shock the system at certain points. At certain points, they get really stagnant in that, the hallmarks of the warm up.
Mm-hmm.
They get really where they stop. It stops being a part where they, like you said, where they are getting better. They're not really getting anything accomplished. And so, periodically, that's where I want to, show up and throw them some curveballs, so to speak.
Okay.
I want to throw in some different things, some different aspects. And you don't want to get too crazy, but you want, again, like I said, you want to shock the system a little bit. We want to keep them on their toes. What happens is that it kicks them into a conscious state where they're now thinking about different things. They're thinking about movements. They're thinking about their bodies. It'll help you get a little bit better proprioception as you move on. I'll add like tennis balls where they've got to toss tennis balls to each other as they're moving and things like that. And it gets them locked in to, hand-eye coordination. It gets them locked into some different things that they typically don't have in order to shock the system. So yeah, I do think it's good to change it up. I do not like to do the same thing. The part where I guess I'm a little funny or whatever is I will not turn over the warm up to any other coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll never let that's my baby. And I am always there. So I'm constantly assessing where they're at. And so the warm up is never a set amount of time. And I've told the kids this before. If we have, like, say something crazy happens and your bus gets delayed and your bus driver doesn't show up, or you get in a crash on the way to a game and it's a 5:00 game and you show up at 4:30, I'm not cutting the warm up. So that we're either starting the game late and you get taken out or do whatever it is you got to do, or all we're doing is the dynamic warm up and we're not throwing, and you can get your throws, during the first inning and in between innings. That's when you'll get your throws. I've let the kid, that's one of the things that the kids know about me. We will always J-band and we will always go through a warm up, pre-game, pre-practice. And we may not swing. There's a bunch of stuff that we may throw out, but that's how important the warm up is. But what I was saying is a lot of times the warm up for me is never a set amount of things. So again, there's the staples, there's the hallmark of the warm up. And then as they're going, I'm seeing, okay, they need a little bit more of this. They need a little bit more of that. And so now I'm sprinkling things in. So the warm up could end up being 7 minutes. It could end up being 27, just depending on what we need to get accomplished that day. And like I said, depending on how they're moving and the tempo that they're moving at. Some days your guys are going to be moving at great tempo and you're going to get the warm up done in 4 minutes. And it's normally a 10-minute warm up. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's the case, then go ahead and move on. You just picked up some time for your practice or your lift or whatever it is. Don't just stretch it out to 10 minutes just because you have 10 minutes blocked. And the same thing, just because you have 10 minutes blocked for the warm-up doesn't mean you shouldn't go 17 minutes. If that's what they need that day, I will compromise other parts of my practice or my training to have a longer warm-up. Then I'll do that before I'll cut the warm-up short and then keep the practice part, the same amount, the allotted amount of time. I'll cut from my practice to have a good warm-up. That's how important I think it is.
No, I love that. And I love that the different perspectives that you're giving with that. But, something else that I'm really interested to hear you speak on, and that's speed work. So what do you have for that, and what can we steal from you?
Speed work is really interesting in that the biggest thing and the biggest mistake that baseball coaches are making or whatever. It's just lack of rest and lack of allowing guys to run full speed. So my biggest advice to you is work as you're working in the weight room, as you're working, really do anything, make sure your guys understand what it is to be fully recovered. So anytime that I sprint, I want to be somewhere between 95 and 100% capacity, 95 to 100% recovered. And I'll be honest, young guys, really, again, the age that I work with, 13 to 15, they don't know what that is. Like I'll tell guys, hey, wait till you're 100%, and they'll still be panting when they get back up to sprint, and they'll take off. And well, there's no way that you were 100%. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One is obviously always have them on the clock. Any of your sprint work, have them on the clock. If you ran flying 30 per se, so you're a build up 30, you build up for let's say 10 yards, and then you sprint 30 yards, and then you decelerate for 10 yards. If you're to do that, then give them a time from the 30, in the 30-yard portion, and then make them aware of that time so that the next time they can't run it any slower. And that's a good way to hold them accountable, and it makes them understand, okay, I didn't rest long enough because I wasn't able to run it that time again. I think flying 30s are great for baseball because a lot of times when we have to get up to full speed, it's not just if we're going to run, say 30 yards or whatever, if we're going to stretch out stretch out a double, we're kind of rolling into that speed. You're not full speed straight out the box. You're kind of rolling. And then by the time you hit second, that's where you're or you hit first, sorry. That's where you're really going, have to go. Or if I'm leg out a triple. So I really like flying 30s. I think it's great. I hate the 60. I think it's the stupidest. I also hate the 40. So I won't be, I'll make sure I don't single out just baseball. I'll also call out ball. I think the 40 is stupid, and I think the 60 is stupid. And there's a bunch of reasons, and I won't list them here. But I really like flying 30s. I think it's a great way to train. And so that's my best advice is really just make sure your guys sprint, and then make sure they go full speed. Make sure they understand what 100% speed feels like. If you can get bands that will help with overspeed, so if you can get guys pulling from the front, guys don't get to feel that a lot. I think that's great. And then any uphill, my high school, I'm so thankful for my high school. We had a hill right to the left of left field. So we could run, and it was a perfect slope, and it was probably about 30 yards. So it was just perfect. Every day I think about that because I wish I had that field, ready for me now. It's hard for me to find it. I haven't found a hill that I can, that I like here in Arizona. Mm-hmm. Hill sprints are just phenomenal baseball because it's great for the lead leg to lead leg block. And, so it helps with throwing, and it helps with, just the hip extension that you have to get when you're sprinting up a hill is the same, strength and extension that you need for throwing a pitch or hitting a ball. So, hill sprints are great if you have access to a hill or treadmill, on an upward slope. Those things are great. So those are things that I would love. Overspeed, if you have bands, get guys overspeed where they can feel themselves going faster than they would normally run. Any sort of hill sprints. And then again, like I said, understanding recovery. That's what I'm telling you, man. High school guys, they always think that working, being tired means that they're getting better. And that's not the case. But just because you're really tired doesn't mean that you got faster that day. Mm-hmm. They kind of equate those two things. And it's really hard because that's what everyone's telling them. Like, oh, if you threw up, you had a good workout. And it's like, no, but that's not the intention of the workout today. Like, we're trying to get faster. You got to run fast. I don't need you to be tired. I don't need you to be throwing up. That's counterintuitive to what we're trying to accomplish. So
No, I love that.
That's my advice on that.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And so, one other thing I wanted to ask you before we get into the advice section is I'm always looking for different competitions to add into our practices, and usually just stuff that we do normally, or just things that we can add to it that just adds that element of, hey, it's going to heighten awareness because you're competing against somebody, but it's also fun, and it's also something that we can track and we can measure. So, what are some of the favorite competitions that you guys do?
So people think I'm crazy. And like I said, even when I started, people would look at me insane because I would have those 9 and 10-year-olds out there doing a dynamic warm up before we threw, or, after we threw or whatever. And people were like, we have a game in 10 minutes. Like, why are they not taking BP? Why are they not doing whiffles? Why are they not,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I implemented recently was we played dodgeball pregame. And our kids love it. And people looked at me like I was insane. And we made it to we had a bunch of 2023s. So they were 8th graders playing in the Fresh Nationals in the fall, in September. And we got to the championship game. And lo and behold, we're in Indians Stadium playing dodgeball, pregame. And it's something that I love for our guys. I love it for their movement. I love it for their creativity. I want to make sure my guys are thinking outside the box as much as I can. They get taught. I think Steve Johnson is an absolute genius at Leg Kick Nation. I think I hope one day that I can work with him side by side and do something amazing, because I just think he's an amazing person, and I'm with him, and that the school system is really broken. And these guys are taught to think inside the box for hours at a time, for days on days, 5 days a week, for 8 hours at a time. They're taught to think inside the box, inside the box, inside the box. So one of the things that I've done from the jump is, as soon as I get my guys, and again, goes back to the warm up. A lot of times it's in the warm up. I try to get them thinking outside the box right away.
Sure.
So I try to give them a game that forces them to almost create the rules on the fly. So I don't like games with a bunch of rules, because that's all they get. They show up to school and they got to sit right here, and they got to raise their hand here, and so right away I give them some sort of game. So that's why I like dodgeball. And then I try to have them create their own type of dodgeball. So one time we played three-way dodgeball. So there were 3 teams instead of just playing the structural dodgeball that it.
Oh, wow.
So you could get hit from any direction. Yeah, you could get hit from any direction. It's not just right in front of you. There's guys to your left and there's guys to your right. We played dodgeball where we put constraints. So I'll take a big one of those kickboxing bags, and I'll put it somewhere on the dodgeball court. And they've got to figure out a way to get, either I can hide behind that and then make my throw from behind that. I could jump over it and try to make a throw from, and the guys, obviously, if you're throwing the dodgeball, you gotta miss that constraint. You gotta miss that blocker right there on the field. I'll do random things like that. One of the games that I love that we play is, or the kids actually love it. We play we call it med volleyball. So you take a medicine ball, we take the soft toss nets, and we put them side by side, 2 soft toss nets, and that becomes our volleyball net, and so now we're getting a strength and explosion. They got to decelerate the medicine ball. That's a really great training tool for them. It's great for their core. It's fun as heck. So whenever we start playing that game, we never want to stop. It's great. It's one of our favorite games. It's one of the kids' favorite games, and I love it too. I get in there and play with them. So that's a great game. Any of the hit tracks games are always going to be fun. You make up your own hit track games. You can do any sort of number of things with that. I love the launch angle game where you've got to force them match specific launch angles so that they're not just in there swinging unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
I want thinking about barrel placement and ball placement and things like that. So that's always fun. And they always, they love it. And we try to, speaking of games, everything we do, we try to have some sort of competitive environment, some sort of competitive aspect to it. So really everything's a game, to be honest with you. With our guys, that's just the way that they're built. Our guys are just super competitive. They always want to compete. So they're always asking me, hey, can we play this game? Can we play that game? So those are some games that we really enjoy. Like I said, dodgeball pregame, that'll get you some real funny looks, especially from the opponent, because they feel like you're disrespecting the game. That's one of the parts about me that's really funny too, is because I'm not a baseball guy. I don't keep myself structured to the typical baseball, unrules stuff. I kind of bring a different side where I don't disrespect the game, but I'm not worried about appearances when it comes to something like that. Like if dodgeball is going to help us get loose and have fun, and like I said, think out of the box, out the jump, then that's what we're going to do. And like I said, my guys like it and they play well and they play loose. And, that's one of the things that I enjoy and they enjoy. And so we continue to do it.
Definitely. Anything that you can make fun and measurable, I completely all in on. And so before you go, I would like to, talk about some changes that you've made lately. And that's something that, especially during I would say off season, but during the training season that we get into, is we're trying to look back and go, man, so what did I do last year at this time? And what did I do, in season that I need to really concentrate on getting better at? So what is something that, if you're looking back, you're reflecting on, maybe the last couple of months or the last couple of years, what's something that you have learned along the way that you can share with us, and, just something that you're really excited about?
I'll be honest. I usually use ABCA in January and AFCA, which is also in January, to reflect on those things and kind of decide what direction we'll focus on for the following year. But I will say one of the biggest things that has come up with me this training season is simplifying so that they can go fast and they can get to that unconscious competence of movement. Mm-hmm. That's been one of the things that's changed, I think, for me over the last couple years, was as I gathered information and I began to, study some of these great guys, the Cresseys and the, Zach DeCant over at TCU and all these guys. There's just so much great information out there. As I begin to study all these guys, I begin to sort of realize that the best thing you can do for your athletes is make sure that they understand and they have a clear vision of what they need to accomplish. They don't need so much variety all of it is, it all swings on the ability of the athlete too, or not just the ability, but the level of engagement of the athlete. There are some athletes that, the less engaged they are, then the more variety you probably need. And the more engaged they are, then the less you need. And so, but you just have to be conscious of it and not just throw out something new because it looks cool, or, because it worked or because it worked for somebody else, because it worked for one guy. Don't just throw it out there and think, okay, it's going to work for this group of guys over here, because that doesn't always hold true. And it typically doesn't. One of the things that I kind of, like you said, probably about 2 years ago, I really, decided that, undefined process and process variation equals poor results. So if I haven't defined, what it is we're trying to accomplish, and then I start to add things on top of that, I'm not going to get the results in the long run. There's going to be times where certain guys, man, it doesn't matter what you do with them. They're just special guys, and
sure. Yeah.
You could throw all types of stuff at them. But for the most part, if you're trying to reach a vast amount of athletes, having an undefined process and then adding process variation, it's just going to equal, poor results. And so I try to make sure that I again, I try to make sure that, we're really big on goal setting. All my guys they set goals almost monthly. And sometimes those goals are big picture goals. Like, I want to do a better job taking the trash out, for my mom. And sometimes the goals are specific, like I want to reach 80 by next month. So it all, I challenge them in a different way. And anytime we set goals, I try to make them think on multiple planes and it's not just always about sports. It's not just always about whatever sport it is that you're playing. It's, I have a female basketball player at Princeton, and she set goals for the beginning of the year to go 50, 40, 90. That was her big goal. Mm-hmm. And so, those are the things that we talk about always. We always talk about goals and how to accomplish them. And then, we come up with a plan. So, so that's big, for us, goal setting.
I love it. And so if there's anybody who wants to get in touch with you, just kind of reach out about, training or just getting in touch with you to talk with you about anything in general, what would be the best way to do so?
On Twitter, I am 3D Robinson, mm-hmm. I believe. I think I'm at 3D Robinson. Or is it Robinson 3?
3D Robinson.
Let me check that. Is it 3D Robinson?
Yep.
Okay. And then Instagram, 3D Sports Performance, I believe it is, on Instagram. Yeah, you could always reach out to me on there. I do a really poor job on social media, I feel like, in relation to some of these other guys. Do a phenomenal job posting content, and I've consistently told myself that I would do better, but I always I get sucked back into, really, I just want to do a good job with the guys that I have. And it's just me. I don't have a staff. I don't have somebody else that could take video or do anything like that. So every time I pick up the phone, I feel like it takes away from my guys, and I don't want to ever take away from helping them, achieve their goals. So I tend to do a bad job of getting video stuff and posting it, but I'm trying to do better.
All right. Well, I'm just going to open up for the mic for you. And is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners before you go?
Yeah, I think I want to just end it by, I said this, I think I posted this on Twitter just recently, that there are no bad teachings, just bad receptions or perceptions of the teaching. Mm-hmm. None of it is wrong. It's just different. And different may not work for a lot of people, 99% of the athletes. But if it changes one life, I don't think you can look at it as bad. So if I'm teaching something poorly, but it's poor for 9% of the athletes that I work with, but it reaches one life and it changes one life, that life can change the world. So we have to do a better job on Twitter and Instagram, and even just with our relationships, on slamming other people's thoughts and ideas, because in reality, we're all just trying to reach an athlete. We're all just trying to make a difference in someone's life. Nobody's trying to have bad teaching. No one's trying to make people less athletic or less fast or better or less good at baseball or any of that stuff. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. And so we have to understand that, man, your teaching might be a little bit better than mine, but honestly, if my athlete can receive it at a way better than the way that you deliver your message, mm-hmm. then there's nothing wrong with the way that I'm teaching that, because we're all just trying to present ideas and our thoughts in a way that can be received by our athletes, because if they can receive them and apply them to life, to sports and beyond, then we've achieved something great.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. Before you go, I'd love to be able to get in touch with you, and we have several different ways of doing so. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AOTC_podcast. You can join the AOTC Coaches Facebook group, and if you want to be a part of the mini clinic emails, both of those links are listed below. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find and stay ahead of the curve.